What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. It's the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 76, on this Thursday, April 18th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy. Oh boy, we've got a weekend coming up. It's the spring game in just a couple of days. About 1,000 portal players, recruits, multiple sports are going to be making their way to Norman this weekend. Of course, we've got our guy here, Collin Kennedy. We're going to get into all of it. Basketball portal, football portal, certainly, and then a whole bunch of high school recruits are all going to be coming to Norman. We're going to break it down as much as we can here on the program. Obviously, Collin, like I said off the top, there's a lot of guys coming. Before we get into the specifics, and we will, and there's a lot to get through, but just can you put into context, I guess, for fans a little bit, just the sheer volume of guys that are going to be in Norman this weekend, both from the portal side of it, which we're going to get into those four, and then the high school side of it. I mean, this is a huge, huge visitor list for Oklahoma this weekend. I mean, can you kind of put into context just the level of a weekend this is for Oklahoma?
We're well into the 70s at this point between portal guys. Yeah, portal guys, recruits, basketball visitors, if you will. It all combines to make for one of the busiest weekends in Norman. And I'm not talking about just the traffic either. I'm sure it's going to be insane to navigate campus this weekend, but a lot of that, of course, has to do with the fact that these visitor lists for, like you mentioned, a couple of different sports, wildly important weekend coming up for Oklahoma, and we're getting ready to talk about it all somehow. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to try.
We're doing what we can. We're going to try and keep this thing under an hour if we can. But it may go a little long today. So hopefully everybody straps in because we got a lot to get to. The funny thing hanging over it that we will talk about just a hair off the top here is that there's a lot of question marks about the game itself as far as when it's actually going to happen. Most people have checked the forecast by now. It doesn't look great for Saturday. There was some talk about this thing moving up to Friday. Obviously, that's not going to happen. You could have probably, I sent this out to our VIP members yesterday. You can probably safely rule that out. And I think now that we're here Thursday morning, you can 100% rule it out. They're not going to move it up in a day's notice. I do feel like there's a lot of volatility still with the kick time. What I've been told that moving the game back a little bit is in play. I mean, look, the reality here from the sense I've gotten, the chance that they were going to cancel it altogether was close to 0%. Oklahoma was not willing to give away the ticket sales. Brent Venables wasn't willing to give away the practice. And Oklahoma wasn't willing to give away the visits, which we're about to talk about. That was kind of the sense I got because the weather does look just crummy. So I posed the question, was there any chance that they just axed it all together? And pretty much got no for those main reasons. Collin, from your perspective, it obviously creates a lot. I'm sure the logistical part of it is already kind of a nightmare a little bit for Oklahoma trying to get all these guys in and figure it all out. But now they're trying to figure out when to actually play the game. Certainly adds an extra level of difficulty they probably didn't need, but it sounds like it's going to happen. It's just probably going to be bumped back a little bit, and that news could break before the show if it comes out. But that's the sense that I've gotten, that we're going to maybe slide this thing back a little bit.
Yeah, look, we're recording 11:15 a.m. on Thursday, the 18th, and you never know with stuff like this because you're battling the state of Oklahoma weather patterns. So this is fluent.
Yes.
To say the least. This is very a fluid situation. That being said, this game is going to happen. I don't think there's ever really been much of a debate. You have to have this go down for a few different reasons beyond, of course, the natural, wanting to get your football team out there for one more practice and let fans take in some action while tossing a little money in to see the event. And then, you, of course, factor in there's well into the 70s as far as targets across a number of sports. And I think for Oklahoma, a lot of this spring game is tailored towards these visitors that we're getting ready to talk about. Why is that? A lot of these guys are coming on campus truly to evaluate their fit at OU. This is a program still a little bit in a transitionary phase going into the SEC. Brent Venables molding this program to the manner in which he wants it to look like. That's still ongoing, so there's a lot left to learn, and everyone coming to the spring game wants to learn more through the context of an actual quote-unquote game being played. Again, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of how they get it done, when they get it done. And it sounds like, again, that they're still trying to figure out the exact plan for that, but it's going to happen in the end.
It's amazing. I joke about it all the time that the weather the week of the spring game is always great, and then the weekend actually of the game stinks, and that has never been more on display than this week. It's been in the 80s and just beautiful every day for the last 5, 6, 7 days, and this weekend's high 50s and rain. It's unbelievable. It's how it happens every year, it seems like. So they're going to figure it out. Regardless of the time, Tom, James, and myself will, of course, be there at the stadium on Saturday, full spring game coverage. Dial into that. If you missed our preview of the game itself, that was on the Monday show. Still there. It's evergreen, not going anywhere. So go check that out to kind of get what we're watching for on the field coming up on Saturday. But as for this program, Collin, a lot of guys, like we said, are coming to Norman this weekend to visit. We'll go ahead and start with the portal guys. I think that's probably the headliner right now for Oklahoma fans. And within that headline, the subset headline within that is Dominic Williams from TCU. Defensive tackle who was all Big 12 last year. This was a guy that when he hopped in the portal, I made a note of it on the board. I expect you to be interested here. It didn't take long for them to get a visit scheduled. He's going to be in Norman this weekend. This is a huge one they're chasing. We just talked about it again on the Monday show, Tom, James, and myself. Positions of need. D tackle was one that jumped out right away. You lost Jacob Lacey kind of unexpectedly, right? Had to medically retire. Dominic Williams coming to town. What's your feel for this situation and this visit coming in from obviously just up the road from DFW?
Yeah, look, this is a spot where it would be very easy for me to use all the buzzwords and all the mysterious context and lead this fan base on. But that's not my job. My job, and I take a lot of pride in it, is being an objective viewer of what's going on.
Sure.
And to remind people, the way that I did during the VIP chat yesterday, Dominic Williams has been on the radar, not just for Oklahoma, but for college football programs across the country as a potential portal option. Once he entered and almost immediately got that visit scheduled to OU spring game coming up this weekend, I think social media blew up for obvious reasons. And I'm going to dive into this pretty thoroughly for our VIP subscribers. So if you haven't joined us yet, I would highly encourage you do so, because I will be dropping thorough intel that I've been able to gather on the 4 transfer portal names we're getting ready to talk about. But Dominic Williams, chief among them, is the name garnering the most buzz. But you mentioned it. Defensive tackle is a positional need for Oklahoma. Defensive tackle is a positional need for every college football program in the country. And when a really darn good one hops in, you better believe that just because he turned right around and got the OU spring game visit done, that doesn't mean he's going to go shut this thing down and immediately call it a day. No, early conversations I've had around Dominic Williams are very interesting. Very, very interesting for a few different reasons. Some that I can't really dive into in a public platform. But what I will say is this. He's originally from the state of California. I have, on pretty good authority, he is certainly interested in exploring options back closer to home. I believe he's actually from the SoCal area. So I would expect USC to play a big role here.
Mm-hmm.
Keep an eye on Oregon. I know that behind the scenes, there's a lot of chatter about the Ducks becoming a pretty heavy contender for transfer portal defensive tackles if the name makes sense. Then you have some other names starting to kind of float around. Some people have mentioned Texas. Some people have mentioned Texas A&M. I can tell you the 2 programs right now for sure that I feel are going to be involved here are Oklahoma and USC. But I am expecting his program list to expand pretty quickly once he leaves campus this weekend. So Oklahoma is definitely in the mix here for Dominic Williams. But in a few different ways, this is going to be a race that still has to play out. I don't think this guy necessarily wants to or needs to be in a rush to make a decision. Now, look, he could make me look like a fool and turn this thing off on Monday after he leaves the spring game, right? You never know. But there are a lot of different avenues in the works for Dominic Williams, and he could easily have his pick of the litter if he allows himself to explore the process. And for those reasons and a few others, I feel like Oklahoma is getting an incredible opportunity here to host him first, but they will not be the last. And so because of that, this is a premium opportunity in a recruitment out of the transfer portal that I feel Oklahoma is definitely going to have its work cut out for itself.
Obviously, a big name. Fans jumped on this one right away, and we'll be keeping an eye on it. That's going to be one of the big question marks or, headlines, storylines, when I talk about it like that on the recruiting side going into this weekend is just how that visit went. And like you said, Texas interested, USC interested. Everybody's kind of interested in Dominic. So we're going to keep a close eye on that one. The good news, I guess, if you want to frame it that way for Oklahoma, is that they do have some backup options. I don't want to diminish the players, but some other options, I guess I should just say, in these D-tackle portal class of guys that are coming in this weekend. From Louisville, Jermaine Lowell is going to be in town. And then from Indiana, Philip Bliddy is going to be in town. He's been one that's been, on the radar for a little while for Oklahoma fans. Both of them are going to be making their way to Norman this weekend as well. What's kind of your feel for those two guys? And is there, I guess the obvious question, for most fans is probably, if they got Williams, does that mean that they will not take these guys, or could it be a both? Where's this all kind of stack up?
Yeah, so I'll kind of tie them all together at the end here. So to touch on the specific players, we'll start with Jermaine, who leaves Louisville, and the early returns that I've gotten in kind of the college realm is there are a lot of people that are a big fan of this player, and you see it immediately. He has obviously Oklahoma coming up this weekend for the spring game, but almost immediately after that, some familiar faces. Washington visit scheduled for a few days after his time in Norman. Just a couple of days after his time at UW, he'll visit Texas A&M, and a couple of days after that, he will visit USC. I can also tell you, and again, this will be more in-depth intel coming for our subscribers, I can tell you there's probably a program or two that has been floated my direction that I have been told Jermaine's camp has reached out to gauge their interest. So while I do believe that Jermaine is someone who could easily take all of these visits and then make a decision shortly after that, I am watching the possibility of a program or two getting involved in joining this list. Now, I think it's going to be very interesting to follow because Jermaine is someone who a lot of people like. He's going to be highly coveted. I think that's going to draw some large NIL opportunities with programs in Texas A&M, USC, and I've even heard some pretty quality movement as far as UW and that program's efforts on the NIL front. I think Jermaine is going to, let's just call it what it is. All these defensive tackles are going to come with a cost.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter who you are. If you're going to get a premier defensive tackle and you're going to beat everyone in the country who's going after all these defensive tackles together, you have to anticipate the price tag. And I think that Jermaine rightfully is the type of talent who's going to demand a pretty significant opportunity or two on the NIL front. But whoever gets him is getting, again, a pretty darn good football player. And I know that a lot of people feel like he could easily be a day one starter type for a few different programs. Going off of that, like you mentioned, Philip Bliddy, he is the other name that OU fans have largely known about now for a long time. He's a grad transfer, so he's been in the portal longer than any of these guys. He's been able to explore his options. And he's been checking a lot of boxes off recently. I believe visits have been done to Washington, LSU, Auburn. He will have concluded this trip to Oklahoma by weekend's end. And then I've heard that there is a potential for him to show up at Oregon maybe a few days later, but that's an influx situation. So again, folks, you're kind of seeing some heavy hitters involved with all these defensive tackles, but the consistent presence, of course, here on the show is Oklahoma. And I think Philip Bliddy, there's a few things that he's looking at that I think Oklahoma can definitely check off for him. There's a few things that he's looking at that I think you still have yet to kind of sort through. Number one, Philip Bliddy, his two biggest things from an on-field perspective are opportunity and development. He wants playing time. He wants to have a shot at the NFL. I believe that Todd Bates can get him both. Obviously, Jacob Lacey's retirement, while pretty tragic, and we continue to wish him the best,
Sure,
it creates a window of opportunity for someone to step into some pretty big shoes to fill. And I was actually having a conversation about this yesterday. Pretty interesting. I had some folks that we were talking ball, swapping some intel, whatever else, and they genuinely asked me, they're like, does Oklahoma actually need a defensive tackle? I mean, I thought the room looked pretty good. And my response was, yeah, I mean, they're pretty much in a quality spot. But I think, again, we forget there is a real opportunity for someone to come into Oklahoma's defensive tackle room and take a starting spot opposite Dejon Terry, because that was going to be Jacob Lacey, right? That was your duo going into the Southeastern Conference. And so for Philip Bliddy, not only could he potentially compete for a starting job at a place like Oklahoma in the SEC, I think he can get the development that he's looking for under Todd Bates, one of the best developers of defensive tackle talent in the country. But then the kind of the unknown stuff. Again, if you're going after a defensive tackle in today's age of the transfer portal, the NIL stuff has to get figured out. And Philip Bliddy, you see LSU, Auburn, UW. If Oregon, like I mentioned earlier in the show, if they choose to get involved with him, you know the NIL opportunities are going to be plentiful. And Philip Bliddy has a family, to my knowledge. I mean, this isn't a younger guy looking at NIL opportunities as far as what can a school do for him. He's navigated this process as a veteran grad transfer, thinking about, how can I not only take care of my family now, but then how can I get to the NFL and make sure my family is taken care of well into the future? And so for Philip Bliddy, again, Oklahoma makes a lot of sense. Still some stuff to work through that I'm sure they'll accomplish during the weekend visit. But this is another one that it kind of gives off the sense a lot still has to be worked through, especially if another program or two gets involved, like in Oregon. I know he's picked up a couple of other recent offers as well. I think Missouri entered the mix. So we'll see. I think you look at all these defensive tackles, and the other part of your question to round it out. I know that Oklahoma wants and basically needs to get at least one of these guys. I believe that there is going to be an aggressive effort to, at the very least, bring one of these dudes in. Can they take two? I don't know. There's two layers to this equation. Everyone would say, number one, will the scholarship count? There will be the natural counter of, well, if there's a high-profile defensive tackle in the transfer portal, you find a way. My thing with it is, okay, you could potentially find a way, but then let's just call it what it is as well. You're not only being asked to make probably a pretty difficult cut to the way that things currently are, you're taking a risk, because one thing that we probably don't know is, do these guys want to play together? I mean, if you bring two in, hypothetically, one of them's not starting unless they beat out Dejon Terry, who, from what we've heard, has been really solid so far in the spring. So I know that there are going to be the big dreamers out there who come to Sooners Illustrated and post on the board, man, Oklahoma, I'm sure, will figure out a way, and they're going to join the movement in our culture because they got the OU DNA. Well, that's great, but they're also grown men at a premium position who want to make sure that they are getting the most out of their situation. And so for those reasons and a few others, I personally believe, as things stand today at about 11:30 in the morning on a Thursday, you're only getting one. Who do you get? The sense that I've gotten from not just talking to sources on the OU side, but I've talked to a number of sources I couldn't tell you on in a few different avenues. I believe that for the most part, a lot of these high-profile defensive tackles are going to go where they know they're the guy. And so We'll see, man. It's going to be really interesting. These are all dominoes that are essentially lined up together. And funny enough, they're all going to be lined up together on the same campus coming up this weekend, and could be a little bit awkward, right? I mean,
Sure.
one of you's coming here. Who's going to join the mix? And I think eventually we're going to have a greater picture. But the current read I get right now is there's not really a firm leader as far as who that actually could be as far as Oklahoma's potential landing of a defensive tackle in the portal.
Yeah, Oklahoma needs one. I know there's probably at least a decent contingent of fans that'll say, we brought in these freshmen, David Stone, Jaden Jackson, just turn them loose. You have DeJohn Terry, you have Grayson Alton, who's had a great camp, it sounds like. Then you have some other guys that have been kind of rising, your Champ Sanders, your Marcus Strong, we've heard nice things about as well. I don't believe that, bringing one of these guys in is going to take anything away from David Stone and Jaden Jackson. I think those guys are going to get their snap a lot, man. You're not taking playing time from those guys by adding one of these guys in. Those two are going to be rotational pieces. They're going to play. But you need somebody that was going to be the Jacob Lacey role, like you were saying, to kind of fill in that other void as a veteran guy alongside DeJohn Terry as your more week-to-week starter. And that's where one of these guys is going to fill that void. Like you mentioned, hefty price tag. Defensive tackles are expensive. The NIL part of this thing. I've been told, and I certainly get the sense that Dominic Williams is going to, he's going to require a pretty solid number, but that Oklahoma is willing to play ball and is going to be aggressive to try and make that happen. It's not one of these, they're just going to get priced out. I do think they're going to try to make it happen. And as far as how much that, is he willing to take a little bit less to play at OU? That's a question only Dominic can really tell you. Right. And we'll find out down the road on that. So that's the sense I've gotten there. Oklahoma's going to be aggressive. Like you said, they got 3 of these guys coming in. It's a position that they need. And we'll see how it shakes out. It's going to be fun to watch. Now, I'm sure there's also a lot of fans that are probably saying, yes, D-tackle is great. You need that. You need that in the SEC. We lost one who we thought was going to start for us in Jacob Lacey. But the storyline of the entire camp has been the offensive line is just, I don't want to say, I don't know if in shambles is too much, but it's in a tough spot. It lost all 5 starters. Troy Everett goes down. He's going to miss basically the entire offseason at least, right? You got to figure out how to kind of fill that void. They've been beat up. They've had injury. Daniel Akinkumi's been battling an injury. It's been a tough camp for that offensive line. They do have one of them coming in as well with Branson Hickman from SMU. This is a guy who's a veteran. He's been he started a lot of games last couple of years for the Mustangs. Obviously, he's just right down the road down there in Dallas. Collin, Branson Hickman. He's kind of the 4th to round up this portal class offensive lineman. This feels on paper, and you know way better than me, but it feels on paper like a slam dunk for everybody to make this happen. They need a guy. They need a veteran. It's Oklahoma. It's Bill Bedenbaugh. It seems like a perfect fit. Is that how it shakes out in your eyes?
No. I think – listen, man, and again, it's the nature of the transfer portal.
Sure.
Not everything is as it seems. But what I will say is this. I think that Oklahoma is actually in a much better spot than I was anticipating going into this weekend.
Sure.
So here's why. Branson Hickman leaves SMU and he joins, I believe, 1 or 2 other SMU offensive linemen to hit the portal. And the initial response that I had gathered from people I trust, especially down here in the state of Texas, was, well, listen, they're probably going to opt to go back with their former offensive line coach. A.J. Ricker, who's the TCU offensive line coach, was once at SMU, I believe. I know that there was a relationship there that many believe was eventually going to be a partnership. I had texted people a few different times about some of these SMU offensive linemen, just making sure, covering my bases, that Oklahoma wasn't going to potentially surge right in there. And up until about probably a week ago, it was, just kind of get the sense that that group of SMU offensive linemen might end up at TCU. But then all of a sudden, I believe the offensive tackle who entered the portal alongside Branson Hickman chose elsewhere. I believe he ended up at Washington, but don't quote me on that. That was when my eyes kind of widened, and I was like, oh, maybe these guys are actually open to playing elsewhere. Well, Branson Hickman, in my opinion, TCU is still very much a contender here.
Sure.
He visited Arkansas not too long ago. and I heard that visit went very well. Arkansas obviously is trying to rebuild what its identity has been for a long time as a program, which especially under Sam Pittman is that offensive line. The Razorbacks simply were not very good up front last season, and they paid for it. And so Branson Hickman has become a priority for Arkansas in the portal at a premium position. But this is something that I wanted to read off. I was texting with a college source of mine, and I was just asking about Branson Hickman, and I'll explain why I feel this is important. I basically asked, what are your thoughts on him as a player? This is what they said. Super smart and has years of CFB experience, and at the center position, that's big in this sport. Some physical limitations, sure, but only in some areas. And by the way, he is a really, really good person. That sounds like a Bill Bedenbaugh offensive lineman to me.
Sure.
I think that Bill Bedenbaugh could bring in someone like Branson Hickman, develop him in a short amount of time, capitalize on some very unique yet important traits, right? He's clearly a very good football player. There's people that I talk to in the college realm who believe he is a day one starter at center for a number of programs across the country. They think he's very witty, smart, knows how to execute things up front. That's, as we know, something that Bill Bedenbaugh covets at the center position. And I think when you talk about the developmental perspective, Bill Bedenbaugh has been able to bring guys in that maybe had things to work on, and they got it done. Even from like Orlando Brown Jr., who was big, overweight, limited athletically, became a very talented offensive tackle in college football, ended up making a definite name for himself in the NFL. Branson Hickman has a lot of redeeming qualities. He is a very talented center at a time where that position might be talked about as much as any other position group on the roster right now for Oklahoma, as weird as that sounds. And at a time where center specifically is one of the biggest storylines as it relates to the Sooners, I think Oklahoma's got a real shot here. Now, I'll tell you this too. Obviously, that college source spoke the world of Branson Hickman. I talked to a few other college sources who thought he was an outstanding human being and a really darn good football player. I was texting with Branson as well, just touching base, getting to know him a little bit. He's clearly a great guy. And the read that I get, not just from him, but from some other folks, is that following this visit at Oklahoma, I really would not be shocked if he opts to make a decision relatively soon. I think we talk about those defensive tackles and that they may not be in a rush. They don't really need to be in the rush. I think Branson Hickman would rather have something done sooner rather than later. And so within that context, man, OU's got a real opportunity in front of itself hosting him on campus this weekend for the spring game. And I'm sure as he evaluates the center position and what it looks like, he'll probably see a very real opportunity to play at a program headed to the SEC. And again, between Oklahoma, Arkansas, TCU, and a few others, he's got some very sensible destinations. I think eventually he'll make the final call. So huge for OU to get him on campus at a time where this could potentially be his last visit, and a guy with clear talent at a position of need. Real shot that the Sooners cover some ground with a priority target in the portal.
Obviously, it's a position of need. I mean, everybody knows that. It's been the storyline since the end of the season. It's been the offensive line turnover. We talked about in this show to death throughout spring camp, and it got worse whenever it got hurt. And Gary and Hatchett's been banged up, and like I said, Daniel Kunkumi's been banged up. It's been tough. It's been really tough. And so they need to add. And Branson Hickman seems like a great fit if they can make that happen. I'd imagine he may not be the last that they look into offensive line wise as the portal continues to churn. Obviously, we get into the summer, but certainly a big one. So that's 4 big portal names are coming this weekend that Oklahoma's going to be hosting. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, Collin's all over it. We'll try and keep you updated as best we can. As far as the high school recruiting element of it, like you said, we're into the 70s in terms of number of guys. I said 4 portal guys, so most people can put 2 and 2 together. That means a ton of high school kids are coming to Norman this weekend. A ton. We'll try and break it up the best we can here. Let's just start with the 2025 guys. That's the class that's obviously coming up. And you imagine, the summer is going to pick up. The 25 class is shaped up pretty nicely. We talked about that last week that Oklahoma picked up 3 new commits going into last week's show. So the class is coming together a little bit. There's still certainly some spots to fill. Kind of paint a picture for fans and listeners and viewers tuned in for the 2025 group of guys that are going to be coming into town this weekend. And what are the storylines kind of for you as far as the names that you're most interested to see how their visits go?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. One storyline I'm following as far as 2025 visitors for Oklahoma this weekend, the defensive back dominoes. I feel like I talk about this a lot, but this is going to be another weekend where that is highlighted. Tristan Haynes, the in-state high 4-star cornerback, will be on campus. At least he's scheduled to be. And Oklahoma's got some work to do. Sounds like Notre Dame's making a serious surge with Tristan Haynes. Miami's been hovering. I believe Alabama's been in the mix at times. A few other programs coveting Tristan Haynes, and rightfully so. If OU is going to continue to be a firm player in this recruitment, I believe this weekend is huge. But then you look at some of the other guys on campus. Cortland Guillory, the 3-star corner, who I believe has a pretty firm shot to become a 4-star whenever the next rankings update drops. Cortland Guillory will be on campus again. I believe this is his 2nd time visiting OU this month alone, which, again, we're just past the mid-month point. So it's been a short turnaround, and I think Oklahoma has really become a serious threat for Cortland Guillory. Once seen as a very heavy Texas lean, it sounds like Oklahoma has kind of turned some things in its favor. And while I still feel the Longhorns are a very serious threat in this recruitment as well, there are people behind the scenes who would argue with me. So interesting to see a couple of cornerback targets on campus there. And then one of the defensive backs that I think we forget, Amarian Robinson, out of the state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
We talk about Jonah Williams. They got Marcus Wimberly in the mix. How does Amarian Robinson fit into all of this? Because he just dropped the top 5. Some big names involved with Amarian Robinson. I believe the top 5 included Georgia, Oregon, LSU, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. I might have one school wrong in there, but there's some high-profile programs in pursuit of Amarian Robinson. But some people have felt that Oklahoma, at some points in this process, has actually held a lead or two over the course of this thing. So that trio of 2025 defensive backs among some other DBs on campus, interested to see how that goes. I do want to mention one more visitor in the 2025s, but there's so many other ways I could go here. One other visitor who I believe is important to get right back on campus, who just visited not too long ago, is in-state offensive lineman Anthony Ogamoro. He's actually set, at least currently scheduled, to make a decision next month. I believe May 21st is the date that he has circled. And Anthony Ogamoro visited OU recently. He has been around a few other programs. I believe he stopped by Oklahoma State not too long ago. I think North Carolina is involved, a few other schools. And with his decision coming up pretty much before you know it, Oklahoma getting him for the spring game, I believe, is big for the Sooners being able to continue to further their standing within this process. So those are a couple of names that come to mind as far as 2025. But again, the list goes on and on. We could probably podcast about the 2025 group alone.
Do a series just on this week.
Exactly.
Ogamoro, yeah, he comes. That's a program on the rise out there in Elgin. Really good coach, Chalmer Wyatt. That's a program that a couple years ago, not to be too disrespectful, was one of the worst ones. And as far as 5A, 6A in Oklahoma, they struggled to win games. and they've been a playoff team the last couple of years. I mean, Chalmer Wyatt, he's completely turned that program around, and players like that have been a big part of it with Ogamoro. Totally with you on the secondary too. We talked about that last week. You bring in Marcus Wimberly, you bring in Malik Hawkins. We talked about that kind of momentum starting to pick up, and you can keep that going in a big way with some of these visits. So it's you're not there yet, obviously, but you have it's in place to be a really, really special secondary class in 25. Yeah. It's kind of like, what the defensive line was in 24. You almost kind of have that in a secondary in 25. When you look at the guys they have and the guys they're chasing, you can put together a serious crop if you can keep it going. So work to be done. And Tristan Haynes has been one we've talked about a lot. I've said right down the road from me at Carl Albert here in Oklahoma City. He's got a ton of teammates that I'm sure are working him all the time. But he's got interest from everywhere. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on that. So a lot of 25 guys. There's a lot more beyond that, though. Like we said, 2026 has got a bunch of guys. There's some 2027 guys. There's even a 2028 guy, which is always fun because that just makes me feel so old when the 2028 guys are getting recruited to OU. What about a handful of underclassmen that have your eye as far as names to know going into this weekend from those younger classes?
Yeah, so 2026, I'll start there. The quarterback position, in my opinion, is starting to kind of step into the spotlight. You had Darion Coleman visit not too long ago. He kind of seems like the most sensible name for OU in that cycle at the signal caller spot. We also had Jaden O'Neal visit not too long ago. That trip went very well. Jaden O'Neal considered one of the best quarterbacks across the country. In 2026, it kind of sounds like Oklahoma, and I hate using this phrase. I hate it more than anything in recruiting. Set the bar during that visit, and so we'll see. But because those names have kind of cycled through campus, the name that I want to start with as far as the underclassmen is Faison Brandon, the 6'4", 180-pound quarterback out of the state of North Carolina. Top 75 overall player for us already in the 2026 class. Have heard a lot of really good things about Faison Brandon. Again, you have Darion Coleman, you have Jaden O'Neal, now Faison Brandon visiting campus. These quarterbacks, how you navigate this moving forward, It's going to be very interesting, and this is kind of the latest in that saga. I've talked about this guy before. Kevin Ford Jr., the edge rusher out of Duncanville, the number one ranked player in the state of Texas in 2026 for us at 24/7 Sports. Really talented player. Long time seen as someone who would ultimately end up with Texas. He would tell you that Oklahoma is probably his favorite school. I'm just here to tell you there are a lot of people down here in Texas who think that's a little far-fetched long-term, but Oklahoma's actually, look, I give Miguel Chavis a ton of credit, man. He's making this thing interesting, and it's a recruitment that really shouldn't be this layered. So Kevin Ford Jr. scheduled to return to campus. He'll be bringing another Duncanville teammate and one of my favorites in 2026, Zachary Turner, the flex wide receiver tight end from Duncanville. Really talented player. And I like what he brings to the table, especially relative to that offense. Caden Jones, son of Kewan, he will be on campus. Markel Ford, my guy. He talks a whole lot of BS to the opposing offense, and he does not care because he can back it up. Markel Ford, really fun, outgoing personality as a DB in 2026. He'll be on campus. The list goes on, but essentially this group, especially in 2026, it delivers. I want to highlight, though, the 2027s real quick. One of my favorite guys that I've built a quality relationship with, Antavius Ellis. He's from down here in my neck of the woods in DFW. Really funny kid. I mess with him. We joke back and forth with each other. I still think he's the ugliest person on the planet, but hey, he can debate me all he wants. Antavius will be on campus. Big time visit for him. I know him and Emmett Jones have really hit it off. And then a couple of in-state 2027 defensive backs. Look, Jaquan Snell is this DB down in Texas in 2027. He's a really talented player. I know a lot of college staffs like him a lot. But Samaj Stanford from Jenks. And then I said it before, and I'll say it again, Josh. How about those Owasso Rams?
I know.
Bryson Brown, another 2027 DB. Cool to see defensive backs, especially underclassmen in the state of Oklahoma, getting early attention, and rightfully so. Two talented players who will be on campus from the 27 cycle. And again, if you're not talking 2027s at this point, you're behind the eight ball, especially as it relates to Oklahoma recruiting.
And then 2028, Micah Rhodes, the running back, which is just hilarious. I love that. That's so great.
Micah Rhodes, man, offered by Baylor.
Going to be a freshman.
Man, I don't know who I can't remember exactly off the top of my head who the other 2028 running back was that we spent like 7 minutes on during the show, but early position group battle, you never know.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Clear sarcasm, but man, it's crazy that this is a thing.
I absolutely love seeing the Oklahoma kids, like you mentioned. It's always fun to get the in-state guys. And, I worked in high school sports in Oklahoma, so I get the chance to see some of these guys, or I'm at least aware of them a lot of the time. Cruz Campbell, another one quarterback. He was at Southmore. He's going to be at Tuttle next year. So house that Jason White built out there, which they have a brand new press box stuff. They're doing a great job out there in Tuttle. Really good program. He'll be making his way too. I know he's on your list, but it's loaded. It's a loaded list, obviously. And if you're a VIP subscriber, you would have had this full list in your possession that you can comb over and look at. The great thing about our site and our database is that the names automatically become clickable. You can tap on them, go right to their 24/7 Sports profile if they have one, which most of these guys do. Some of the younger guys, a little hit or miss. But Micah Rhodes does, 2028 running back. And so you can learn all about these guys. One of just a million reasons to become a VIP subscriber to Students Illustrated. And you can go through this list and learn all about all the guys that'll be coming to Norman this weekend. It's going to be a local group. There also is a bunch of guys who are committed to OU coming in as well. Obviously, guys who haven't signed yet in the 24 class, including Taylor Tatum. Eddie Pierre-Louis will be coming in, which, Eddie Pierre-Louis, it's going to be really hard as a true freshman who came in the summer. But considering the current state of the O-line and then just his freakish nature, who knows? He could maybe be in the mix right away in fall camp. That'd be a fun one to keep an eye on. And then 2025 guys are coming in as well, along with, of course, Kevin Sperry, who's just at everything. So the move didn't affect him yet.
And by the way, got a shout out. We talk about the 2024s and 2025s. My guy Jonathan Hatton Jr. will be on campus as well. All-time favorite, quickly becoming one of my all-time favorites that I've ever covered.
He's a fun one. I'm excited just to see some of these guys in person. I don't know they're not going to be doing anything but standing around, but sometimes you just know. That's how it was with Devon Mitchell. That's how it was with David Stone. That's how it was with a lot of these guys. You just see them, you go, yeah, that right there. That's what we need coming to Norman. And we'll get a chance to do that a lot. It's going to be a crazy visitor list, and the sidelines are going to be jam-packed on Saturday, and I look forward to it. It's going to be a massive recruiting weekend. Again, become a VIP subscriber. Collin is all over all this, and I know that our VIP members will not be waiting long. I'm sure on Saturday night, Sunday morning, they'll be waiting for some feedback, and Collin will get that out to everybody as quick as he can. Well, it's going to be a massive weekend. Now, we're still not done. We have a little bit more here. Hoops. Basketball portal. A couple of guys visiting on the basketball side of things this weekend as well. So, quick little State of the Union for the basketball portal. They didn't get Kevin Overton, which wasn't super surprising when it happened. I mean, he committed to Texas Tech on Tuesday, which is how that felt like that was leaning. So they didn't get Overton. The two other big targets we're still waiting on, Brandon Garrison and Sean Padula. We talked about this last week, and I talked about it a little bit with Tom on the Monday show. You gotta find a way to get at least one. I mean, if you go 0 for 3, that is a body blow for Porter Moser and Oklahoma in the portal. You missed out on Overton. You're still chasing these other two guys. Brandon Garrison supposedly visiting Texas this weekend, which is a little frightening. Hopefully you can survive that. Sean Padula, we're still kind of waiting. These guys have interest from other places, and so you're kind of waiting to see. But as far as other targets, there is a couple more, relatively new names, guys we haven't talked on the show just yet, that will be making their way to Norman this weekend. Aaron Scott from North Texas, He's a 6'7", like wing forward type of player. He's played a few years out there, played a lot of games for Texas the last 3 years. And then also from Dayton, Kobe Elvis, who is a guard. And like we talked about before, they need guards. He's also going to be coming to Norman this weekend. So a couple of guys from the G5, I know that's not really a basketball term, but the G5 ranks are coming in this weekend. Collin, I guess kind of do a little recap on how things sit in the basketball portal for you as Oklahoma still is looking to get on the board here in this portal cycle.
Yeah, Kevin Overton, first off, was great dealing with him. He was very transparent with me, and obviously we reported that he was going to make his decision shortly after that Texas Tech visit, and it ended up being the Red Raiders. And I talked to a few people in some circles, and my take on it was essentially if he leaves Lubbock, Oklahoma had a real opportunity to get him. He did not leave Lubbock without a commitment. And so now you're back to the drawing board. But what I'll say this as I talk about these other guys, I believe personally that this kind of shows you specifically how important it is. You mentioned get at least one of the two. I personally think storyline-wise, this shows you why Brandon Garrison has been the guy from day one for Oklahoma. Now, if they miss out on him, compared to Sean Padula, who I think is a heck of a basketball player, Padula has 1 season left of eligibility. He plays guard. As you can see here, between Kobe Elvis, who's a guard from Dayton, and then Aaron Scott, we haven't talked a lot about the wings in the transfer portal cycle, but
yeah, it's been all bigs and guards. Yeah,
some perimeter versatility can at least help you in areas like that, right? Man, you can figure out the way to navigate things at guard because like Kevin Overton comes off the board, and all of a sudden now you're involved with the Kobe Ellis. You have Aaron Scott in the mix as well now, as Sean Padula still remains. Still not a lot of bigs on the board for OU currently. And I think that's, again, a very telling sign as far as how important this portal window is relative to some of these positions that we're talking about. I still think Oklahoma's in a pretty solid spot with both those guys. There's a lot of buzz, especially I talked to some sources outside of the Oklahoma equation related to some of the programs that were involved with those other two names that we talked about. A lot of optimism on those parts of the equation pointed towards Oklahoma. So we'll see. Like you mentioned, it sounds like Garrison still might be willing to entertain the process. We've been saying since day one, the last thing you want if you're Oklahoma is for Garrison to extend this thing for however long he wants to. You were hoping for a quick process. That has not happened. So on the Garrison part of the equation, it's still a hold your breath thing. But I think this weekend specifically, as you welcome Kobe Elvis, and Aaron Scott to campuses, start to work towards some of the other parts of this as it relates to perimeter players. Obviously, you have Caden Cooper still around the program. You're hoping that you get someone like Jalen Moore back in the fold. So there's at least some pieces, right? But if you were to miss on Sean Padula, you have Kevin Overton off the board. You got to figure out some of the action that might take place on the wing. And Kobe Elvis and Aaron Scott could be a big part of that coming up this weekend as they take their visits in Norman.
Yeah, it's scary hours right now for Oklahoma because, I mean, you're in position to be fine, certainly. I mean, Garrison and Padula have been the two biggest fish of this entire thing, and they're not committed anywhere. You still have a shot to get them, certainly. But, you know, you can't help, I feel like, if you're an OU basketball fan right now and think, if we don't get these two guys and Jalen Moore decides to go to the draft, you know, he doesn't pull his name out and come back, oh my gosh, like what is our team, you know, right now? Yeah. So, yeah, it's a bit of a tipping point right now. You got to find a way to lock up something. And like I've said the last like 6 shows, they're waiting for some good news. Nothing good has happened just yet. And again, it sounds like I'm not saying that they're out on Garrison or Padula at all. They still have a great shot to get them both. But it's not, you know, it's not done. It's not done either direction. So you're still chasing them. You didn't get Overton. You know, you're still waiting on what Jalen Moore's going to do, and he's in no rush to make a move. He doesn't have to make a move for another few weeks at least. It's like in May sometime when the deadline is. So you're kind of in limbo right now for Like, how dire is it? And we'll see. Like I said, Brant Garrett's got some more visits. Sean Padula, don't know if he's going to do more visits, but he is getting interest from other places, so he may, So we'll see. We'll see. A little bit tense right now.
This feels like when you're going up the roller coaster and you get to the top and you have that sinking feeling in your gut, and we're about to figure out if the roller coaster is going to crash and come back up and you get that sense of relief.
Yeah.
Or if you're just
down.
So
coming back up.
We'll find out, but it literally is that feeling of just waiting to see what happens next. And everyone's tense feelings towards the situation, I think it's 100% justified. You just got to wait finally for that tipping point. And when that is, I think we are all kind of fine in saying we don't know. So.
Yeah, right. No, like I said, I mean, I just kind of outlined the disaster zone if you didn't get both and Jalen Moore decides to go in the draft. The flip side is a great situation. If you get both the guys and then Jalen Moore does come back, you maybe add these 2 visitors this weekend with Cooper back and Godwin and Northweather. It's like all of a sudden Jacob Cole, all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got a decent little group here to kind of build on. So there's still, I guess, long story short, a lot of volatility still with what this team is and where it's going to be going into that first year in the SEC. So we shall see. We shall see. It's going to be a crazy weekend. We're excited. A little scared of it, but we're excited at the same time. A lot going on. It's going to be wild. We'll see what the weather does and when this game actually happens on Saturday. But whenever it does happen, like I said before, Tom Green, James D. Jackson, myself, will be at the stadium in Norman. Full spring game coverage throughout the day. Obviously during the game and afterward reaction from Brent Venables players. We'll certainly recap the game and everything else that goes on. Collin will be all over the recruiting side of it for our VIP members, on the site, Sooners Illustrated. And we'll have more takeaways on Sunday, the podcast on Monday. James Shaw and myself will kind of dive into all the ins and outs of the spring game, who stood out, concerns, things we liked, all that good stuff will be on Monday. And then Collin will circle back next Thursday to kind of, get into whatever ramifications have come out of that. And I'm sure update on these portal guys and everything else. It's a busy time of year in the spring. Spring football is winding down, but the recruiting and portal are just ramping up. So it's going to be fun times here coming up. So Collin, Godspeed, and I'll be pulling for you. We'll all be pulling for you.
Same to you, my friend. Let's hope we come out on the other side.
Mother Nature hates me. It hates us. So hopefully, if as a guy who's outside of these things, let's be cool. Just be cool.
Are you a stylish rain jacket guy, or is it just like you got the beat up Nike rain jacket and it's been in the closet for 2 years now?
I just have it's just like a Nike. It's a pretty nice one, but it's just like a black Nike rain jacket. It gets the job done. I mean, look, the Kansas game last year in Lawrence was the worst weather that I've ever experienced in my life. So if I got through that, I felt I could get through anything. It was like in the 30s and just pouring rain the whole game. So if we got through that, we can get through this, but it won't be pretty. It won't be pretty, but we press on. That's why they pay us the big bucks, right? So
big.
Yeah,
we'll see. I challenge our subscribers especially to judge the fit for Callaway in the spring game. Send us a couple pictures on the board, because I've seen Callaway bundled up for some bad weather games, and wow.
Yeah,
there's layers, and there's stuff that I'm like,
I hate being cold. I don't mess around. I hate being cold. For a game like this, a wet game, extra pairs of socks will be brought, because wet socks is just, I would wish that on my worst enemy, wet socks. So extra socks will be brought. It's going to be a whole thing. Hopefully the weather let's get the rain out of the way in the morning, maybe move the game back a little bit, and then we're in the clear. That's my dream scenario, I think, right now. So we shall see. We'll be sure to update everybody if the game gets moved, and it sounds like decent chance of it at least. We'll be sure to update you as well on the site as well. I think that's it for now, though. For Collin Candy, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys. James and I will have a quick recap edition show, just like we did during the season, on Saturday after the spring game, and then we'll have the full get back to the normal schedule, regular show on Monday with Tom, James, and myself. Collin back next Thursday for all the recruiting and portal news. Until then, We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.